fisherman is born, not made. This is a different world. For the fisherman who visits it regularly, it's a morning world, a familiar book with chapters still to come. His traps, his hopes, his investment, all lie 20 fathoms deep on rocky bottom off the coast of Maine. There's a good living to be made in the Atlantic Ocean if anybody will go and get it.
There's a patch of water around Machias Seal Island that's in contention between Canada and the United States.
The northern Gulf of Maine has suddenly become optimal for lobster. Our population here has exploded. One of the most valuable fisheries that's ever existed.
Suddenly you had Maine and Canadian fishermen in these waters at the same time, jousting for position.
And tensions are high, violence is bound to happen.
This is the last land border dispute between Canada and the United States. It could be magnified to the point where there could be costs that would be significant to both countries. Border disputes don't go away, they just fester. Something's going to happen.
In some ways, lobstering is immensely complex. In another sense, it is simple and direct. The sea and the boat remain the ruling force in a saltwater man's life. And the quest of fish, the thing that brings not only the rewards of toil, but a sense of freedom.
Just left the port of Seal Cove on Grand Manan Island. We're here right now where that little ship is. We're headed towards Machias Seal Island to go haul lobster traps in the gray zone. My name's Brian Guptill. I'm president of the Grand Manan Fishermen's Association. I started fishing before I got out of high school and been at this ever since.
So what's happening?
Places around this area, the blue market.
Good enough. This is my 53rd year of lobster fishing. I started fishing when I was still just a kid in school. I fish 800 traps and every one of them are in the gray zone.
This area of water here is closed, and when you come to the line, you'll see the gears stacked right up on it. That's the most lucrative spot. That's where the most of the guys are going to go. That's where most of the snarls will happen. The way it's got to go, I guess.
In the last 4 or 5 years, it's been getting more and more crowded every year. I think it's part of the Canadian government's efforts to get control of some of the gray zone that they never really had full control of before. I think the Canadian government's plan is to cause enough conflict and issues between the fishermen out here that I think what they would like to see happen is they'd like to see the fishermen have almost like a trap war.
There's been people fishing in the gray zone long before it was ever a gray zone. But the Canadian government cut back on their patrols of the line, so the Americans were fishing in undisputed Canadian waters.
And actually one of my own trawls, they claimed that it was over the line. over the U.S.-Canadian line that is out on the Canadian side, which it was not. So I came out and confronted them and told them that if they didn't give the gear back, I'd just sink them and take the gear off the deck as they was going to the bottom. They gave it back. I guess they didn't want to walk home.
After 4 years of arguing about it, one of the Americans said, if you want any economic benefit out of that in the summertime when you're not fishing, you better come fish it with us. So the guy from the government of Canada said, just a swipe of a pen, buddy, just a swipe of a pen. And within 2 weeks we were fishing.
We have a line on our charts that says the United States is on one side and Canada is on the other. And I think our government should step in and enforce that line. Claim the zone as it really is, that it's all American, not Canadian at all. There's only so much you can lose before you feel like you have to start defending yourself and defending your property.
20 years ago, there wouldn't have been hardly any boats from either side fishing. Over time, the abundance of lobster has increased and made it more lucrative, and people have figured out if we want to get a crack at those lobsters, we got to fish at the same time they do. We're not backing down. They're Canadian waters. We're going to fish it.
Here on this granite ledge above this sheltered cove begins his day. One day in the life of one man. The sea, with its islands, is the place of business for a whole breed of men who don't mind wet feet.
Canada and the U.S. share a 5,525-mile-long border, and this is the last piece of land that we're still contesting after more than 200 years of border making. So Machias Seal Island and North Rock, actually, depending on whether they're American or Canadian, that determines whether the waters around them are American or Canadian. So this gray zone, it contains a fairly rich harvest of lobsters.
But it's no job for the lazy or the fearful. At the right moment, the man eases his motor, rolls his wheel, pulls his clutch. With his gaff, he brings the warp aboard. He enters it in the snatch block, takes a couple of turns around the winch head, and the hoister takes over the work. The trap breaks water and is hauled on deck. A bushel basket makes a satisfactory catch-all on a lobster boat. This is one of those days when you get ahead.
This is where the border now ends. That is the agreed-upon border between Grand Manan Island and the coast of Maine. And the reason there's this divot here is that if Machias Seal Island, which is here, is Canadian, the Canadians say this is the border that would exist. The United States actually bases its claim on a channel, what they call the Northwest Channel, that runs along the ocean floor here. That creates this gray zone. It's all based on whether Machias Seal Island is American or Canadian. When the Revolutionary War was over, the peace treaty was signed in Paris. So the treaty said that all islands within 20 leagues of the coast of the newly independent 13 colonies would be American, except any island that had ever been part of Nova Scotia. The official U.S. position is that Machias Seal Island is not now and never has been part of Nova Scotia. And this is the beginning of the conflict.
Alongside the long-legged wharf, Nor'wester comes to rest for the first time since daybreak. He unloads his catch and weighs it in to await shipment to the markets.
For most of recorded history, those waters were basically just exploited by Maine fishermen. In 2002, the Canadians changed their fishing seasons to allow Canadian lobstermen to fish in the gray zone during the summer. The real tensions began then because there were just so many more people fishing in those waters. My concern is there's no country in the world that's more important to the United States than Canada. And to allow an issue like this to sit there with the potential of causing an ugly dispute, it could be magnified to the point where there could be costs that would be significant to both countries.
been in the business for a little more than 10 years. There has been a huge increase in the landings. Not too long ago, it was 20 million pounds, 30, 50, 60 million pounds. And then it got to be maybe 100 million pounds. When it got to that point, people really started to take notice. And lately, it's been about 130 million pounds. So there's been a huge increase in supply. It could be because waters continue to warm in the state of Maine and it's pushing the catch north. And the catch seems to be going down more to mid-coast and beyond, which is what we call down east Maine, and which is often called, way down east is called the gray zone, right along with Canada. There's definitely more landings in that area than there were 10 years ago. There's no question about it. But I think that people, for the majority of people, feel that we're at our peak in landings right now. I think that's on the front of everybody's minds at this point. The issues in the gray zone can impact the market for Maine lobster because that's really Maine product. And once it goes to Canada and it comes back as product to Canada, then people don't associate it with Maine. The Maine brand is really what Maine sells. And it's not just the lobster industry, it's the tourism industry. And if we lose market share because of that, that can really hurt the industry.
Lobster is incredibly important here on the coast of Maine.
It was worth more than $500 million just to the boats last year.
It's not just the captain, it's also the crews that are doing very well.
It becomes a huge, huge driver of the economy on the coast.
For trap builders, for boat builders, for all the infrastructure that goes into distributing lobster.
It's one of the most valuable fisheries that's ever existed.
Interestingly, it's not actually the price that has changed that much, but the volume has changed a huge amount. Up to the early 1990s, they were only landing about 20 million pounds. In 2016, we landed 131 million pounds.
But even with all of that year-to-year change, the landings haven't been uniform across the state.
Water temperature drives biological processes for lobster. And as water warms, it is possible that those biological processes could break down.
Over the last 10 to 15 years, the Gulf of Maine has warmed faster than 99% of the global ocean area. If you look south of the Gulf of Maine, places like Rhode Island and southern Massachusetts, the lobster fishery there has basically collapsed.
Beginning around that time frame, lobster catches in the state of Maine started to increase at an exponential rate.
Even when the water temperature is warming, it's still cooler than the areas that they were leaving.
We can see that species are steadily starting to move towards the poles. There are, of course, other changes that are going on in the ecosystem, and one of the really big ones has been the decline of the groundfish.
Like cod, haddock.
We're big predators on tiny lobsters.
That's opened up a lot of habitat for lobster to move into.
The lobster population has taken advantage of those environmental conditions and had a boom.
What we're seeing is that the lobster is becoming a bigger fishery right along the border between the US and Canada.
And it's not a good scenario.
They are competing for the same resources, and yet they're living by different rules.
Large lobsters are able to be caught by Canadians, but not by Americans.
So they're fishing with different types of gear, sometimes heavier gear.
Seasons are different.
And that's creating more controversy.
Especially now that it's an increase and it's so lucrative right now.
It's a worry about what's going to happen to those fishermen.
Before the advent of hydraulic heisters and plastic rope, nobody fished here. All that stuff made it capable of starting to fish in these areas. Oh yeah, I eat lobster. Anytime I want it, I take some home and eat it. It's the old days you used to eat aboard the boats, but it's illegal now. Because of the length, 13 or 14 pounder, I would say. Inshore Maine can't keep those. That's part of their management strategy. There are guys that fish in congested areas in a gray zone, some of the hot spots. I know if I cross the line over there into sovereign U.S. waters undisputed, there's a big boat with a big gun on it, but if you didn't stop, they'd tell you they were going to fire into the hull, and if you don't stop, they'll shoot and stop the engine. But that's the general practices of the U.S. Coast Guard. The tide runs in different directions at different times, and it's a hard job to tell where other people are sometimes. There's the blue one down below us, I know is Canadian just by the look of it. That might be an American down below us there too. There's a lot of little boats. Like right now, the tide's slack. Somebody can come along and think they got all kinds of room, but your actual trawl's a lot different than where your balloons are. If you make a mistake and get on top, somebody else will cut you off. There's all kinds of people that have had conflict. Sometimes you lose some traps. It's all part of it. We might have some fun on this one before it's over with.
My brothers lobster fish, my nephews lobster fish, my grandchildren lobster fish. It's in the blood. This community's main source of revenue is our fishermen. They keep the street lights going, they keep our town roads paved, they keep school going. If they were to lose that area out there, it would be a huge impact on the town of Cutler.
Before 1984, there was no Canadians in this area. There was no gray zone.
Each year goes by, they bring more and more fishermen over.
We're talking two countries, so it's a lot harder to resolve differences.
People get angry and it's getting more dangerous every day.
Every lobster that's caught by a Canadian is one lobster that's not caught by an American.
And that's, dollars, not in the local economy, which we need drastically.
We don't have any territory.
Can't go any further east. We can't go any further to the southern because if you get into Bucks Harbor and Jonesport territory, you're going to lose gear.
So what fishermen we have is crowded into the area already as it is.
This is our territory. Well, the Canadians have got a 110 square mile slice out of it. That's a pretty big chunk.
That's what the biggest fear is, not having a place to fish. This community would severely suffer if you took that bottom away.
I think it's time something needs to be done, that's for sure.
We could have stopped this before it even started if we'd have had any political help.
Our government does not come out and back us up as much as their government does. And we need more backing from our government is what we need.
If I go over onto the Canadian side of the U.S. boundary line, they take me, my boat, my gear, my crew, put us in jail. But they can come within 4 miles of the Cutler shore and fish. So, what are you gonna do? Grin and bear it, huh?
Somebody's gonna get killed whether it's on this side or that side. That's my opinion. And it's just a matter of time.
When I started down here, this was a one-man patrol. And now we got 4 guys, plus myself, down here in this area. We enforce all the laws of the state of Maine, but our main focus is commercial fishery. Before, we may go to the gray zone, once or twice a month. now they were down there every week. It's a hard area to patrol because it's so open to get there. They can see us coming for miles. You know, lobster fishing here has just been astronomical in the last few years, and people know that. I mean, they can see the statistics, and when they do, they're going to fish it. You know, we hear that you know, that they're getting crowded by the Canadians, pushing them further in and setting over top of them on purpose. We've had a couple of complaints where they think the gear's getting hauled by the Canadians. I know they would like us to enforce the law on the Canadian fishermen, but we have no jurisdiction doing that. In the long run, I mean, it's just, they're there to stay. You're not going to drive them out. There's more coming. I mean, now we have, back a few years ago, there was like probably 9 to 12 boats down there, Canadian vessels, fishing out of Grand Maine. Now you got boats from Grand Maine, Campobello, and Nova Scotia fishing in there. You know, I've heard of up to 45 boats in there now. A lot of these fishermen are maxed out. You know, they've got a lot of investment here. And then they're not catching the lobsters. Things get rough, tempers flare, and I think that's where your conflict starts.
Everybody calls it the gray zone because once the battle started over it, you know, it kind of became a bit gray as to who actually owned it. So I was actually the first Canadian fisherman to fish in the gray zone.
When the good Lord put the lobsters in the water, he didn't say these are for Maine or these are for Grand Maine, so catch them if you can and get along. Maine lobster fishermen fishing there, they're bothering our catch. Let's get down and catch some of them before they do. The gray zone is really, you know, contributed to the economy on Grand Maine, and we are contributing more to the provincial and federal coffers than any community our size because of the lobster industry.
So nobody fished it from Canada for years and years and years because it was more lucrative to fish sovereign Canadian waters. But they were getting no economic benefit to Canada out of that stretch of water that we consider to be ours. So we created a summer fishery.
It went from one year we'd catch maybe 50,000 pounds, and other years we've caught up to 130. So there's a big difference, and hopefully it stays that way for a while.
Most of the tension has been about is a very high dollar value, and everybody wants it. They don't want the other guy to get it, they want it themselves. Plus just the outright dispute part of it where it's, you're taking our lobsters, and you know, the other guy saying, no, you're taking our lobsters.
Afternoon Fishermen's Association. Right now we're in the neighborhood of 200 to 250 members, both captains and crew, and that's probably at one of our highest points right now. It was really more of a sovereignty issue when we went down there. It's a way for the government of Canada and for the people of Canada to continue to claim that piece of bottom that both the US and Canada claim. And it's a way for us to derive an economic benefit from that bottom that we weren't able to before. Over the last, I'd say 5 to 7 years, our landings have almost doubled. So it's created really a year-round economy here on the island.
It's like a domino effect because, you know, if the fishery does good, then the small businesses do well. As fishing ended, the fishermen go on unemployment because there was nothing to do, and now people are working year-round.
The boats are getting larger engines. There's houses being sold and bought. 90% of people are driving new vehicles. You know, the economy's great.
But the more lucrative it's become, the more money people are making, the more nasty people have become.
You hear horror stories about having one of your trawls towed into a ball or something. You go hook onto it and spend 4 hours trying to get your traps all clear of this big pile of rope. Keeping yourself clear of the other guy, basically. That's the name of the game.
And it's always a bit contentious to go there. I try hard not to be worse than I have to be, but there comes a point when you get pushed so far where you just have to say, okay, that's enough. We're gonna stay here. Because if I ask you to move somewhere and it's gonna cost you a few $100s, you might go, yeah, well, that's not that big a deal. It's gonna cost you $100,000. I'm going anywhere, right? And that's what's happened. There's no warm and fuzzies down there. I mean, I got some respect for some of their fishermen. I think some of them do for us. And, you know, if somebody was thinking, I'm going to go alongside and help, same as I would if it was a Canadian boat. But they're not coming to my house for tea and coffee, you know, and I'm not invited to theirs.
When I got out of high school, I wanted to fish. I had my first license when I was 10 years old. My next door neighbor was a lobster fisherman, and I just loved it. I went with him in the summertime. I saved up enough money working with him for 2 or 3 months that I bought 4 brand new traps. I can remember it cost me $104. Growing up through high school, okay, I got so much money now. Do I buy a vehicle or do I buy a boat? Oh, I bought a boat. And I've done it for years and years and years. I've done it a long time. Right now we're just coming out of Cutler Harbor, and Lighthouse is right here behind us. And we're actually going to head outside a little ways and see what we get. Haul it up, take the lobster, put it in the floor like we always do. We'll just run it out and then I'll run it right back overboard. My 2 sons, I know my oldest one, he definitely wants to fish. Lau, you gonna run this trap? Got the bloom. I'd like to see him go to college and take a trade so he can have something to fall back on, because the way this is looking, I just don't know what there's gonna be here for a future down the road. It's getting to the point now where it's becoming way more dangerous because of Canadians. And their government will come out here and their fisheries will start grabbing hold of your balloons and start yanking on the rope and start yanking on your stuff. I mean, I've lost hundreds of traps over the years. And the wardens will call them up and it's kind of, you know, their hands are tied. Well, you know, it's a, you know, you got to be careful what we say. You got to be careful what you do. No, you don't. You know, this is America. That's American grounds. Another story that happened, one of my friends, they were hauling inside the line a little ways, and here come the DFO boat, the speedboat, pulled up beside them and hauled their guns out and said, you know, don't move, you're under arrest. You're fishing in Canadian waters. They said, we're not fishing in Canadian waters. These 2 guys are scared to death. I mean, they had their guns out. Harassment, wicked bad from the Canadian government. Awful. Yeah, in the gray zone where it's very congested and it's much more challenging. It's a lot more time consuming, very much, you know, a lot slower. By the time you have to tow your end line and make sure you don't get on top of the next person, or try your best not to get on top of them. Every year there is more and more gear. More and more Canadians come over and fish the gray zone. And obviously the more traps you put into a small area like we have, the more tangles and the more chances for somebody to get hurt. It was November 6, 2007, and I got a call on the radio. One of the Canadians was fishing beside me and said that him and another Canadian, they had 2 trawls that was tangled together. Being tangled is not good. It's very, very dangerous. That's one of the conflicts that you have when you have 2 different, you know, style of fisheries fishing with each other that don't fish the same way. You don't fish the same direction, you know, that kind of stuff's gonna happen. And when I got there, it was slack tide, so I grabbed my trawl and started hauling it up. And when my trawl came up, it was wicked heavy. And there was traps just hanging everywhere. So as I'm dealing with it, I wasn't really paying much attention to my hauler. I was more, you know, trying to make sure that nobody got hurt, telling the guys what to do. Grab this trap, we'll cut it off. And it keeps getting lighter and lighter and lighter, then you can deal with it better. So I've got like 8 or 10 of my traps off, and then all of a sudden it popped out of the hauler, and when it did, my arms was in it, and there was no stopping it. There was no, I mean, that just shows you how much force there is when that decides to go. It was either gonna haul me overboard or my arm off, so I mean, I braced off. And you know, once the bang went, I fell over backwards and set up real quick, and I looked, and you know, it ripped my glove, and it was my thumb was gone. It was just, there was nothing left. said, just cut the rope. We got to go. Because somebody's going to get hurt. Somebody's going to get killed. But I'm still alive, and I'm still doing what I love to do. I'm not doing it as good as I used to, but you know, I'm definitely thankful for still being alive.
Folks, thanks for sticking around. Like you had a lot of say in the matter. None of us are VIPs. Well,
I am.
we'll say you are, if you paid us. We're off in a cloud of smoke. Been operating, running Bold Coast Charter Company here out of Cutler for 30 years. Storm petrels here on the right. They're a true pelagic bird of the open ocean. The significance of the island is really in its providing a critical home for a variety of migratory seabirds. Creatures of any sort don't have any legal standing, it's true, but I would still say they're the true inhabitants, the owners of the island. I have to watch this boat here coming up on our port side, make sure. Oh, he's got gear. Jesus Christ. Canadian boat. There's a danger the trap's going overboard. The line is near the surface, trap trawl, and so he should have radioed me and let me know. I wouldn't have passed astern of him. And with 30 years, I've seen quite a change in the amount of fishing and the amount of boats and the activity out here. It increases the risk. We might run into something, so it's just a bit more of a challenge to navigate. We have to keep a fairly sharp watch here at the helm. Anyway, crisis averted. Folks, we have arrived. In case there's any doubt in your mind, you're getting your first initial good looks at these puffins. And look at the shoreline over there. Spaces, gaps in the ledges, spaces under rocks and boulders piled up there, a natural seawall there caused by the wave action over eons of time. And they take advantage of the protection, the confined spaces that those locations provide. Okay, we can shut down the boat, and then the plan of action will be to prepare for invasion. Rub-a-dub-dub! Folks, what goes on a Machias Seal Island stays on Machias Seal Island. The goal of the trip is really to just raise awareness of the importance of critical habitat for the abundance and variety of seabird species in the Gulf of Maine. If they were born here, this island is imprinted on them. So the puffin will not just return to the same island, the same breeding spots, but in many cases the same burrow, the same exact couple square feet of land mass on this island. These are cold water seabird species, and as temperatures, conditions change and warm, that's likely to cause a diminishment of fish stocks that they prefer and rely upon. The puffins, some of these other cold water species will, in time, they will withdraw northward. The original lighthouse on Machias Seal Island dates back to the 1830s. That's a long time, but the birds have been here longer.
It didn't feel like another country because they didn't check our passports.
Should be shared, looked after by both places.
The disagreement over sovereignty, I have to get permits from both Canadian and U.S. authorities to continue to do the tours. I don't have any axe to grind, I guess. The fishermen, obviously, understandably, do. They're clear-eyed about this. They've already contacted their legislators. They've already spoke to federal fisheries people, and there just hasn't been any real willingness to go to bat, for the fishermen. So really, what other recourse do you have? It's just the way things are.
Like I say, every day is the same. Nobody's ever made any come up the wharf with guns and stuff. They're going to take it over. This is why war should be fought.
Drinking coffee, talking it over.
Over the table, yeah.
Is this American land or is this Canadian land?
It's disputed land. We're Canadians, and like I say, we've
We man it and we fire a flag, and it's because we're here.
It's a disputed property, so I would say Canada because we're here. We've been here a while, quite a while, so I'd say it's probably Canada's.
Do you remember Barna Norton?
Oh, I remember Barna. Oh, yes.
Tell me about Barna.
He used to come and bring the flag up and fly that at 4th of July.
I think he was a hardcore American, so he liked to try to establish his claim.
Oh, they've pulled a few tricks on it before, you know, paint all the flags, Canadian flags on the lawn for the 1st of July. And then he got back to us a couple months later because all the flags turned white and he said they all surrendered.
This is Barnaby Norton, Lieutenant Commander. He was the first defender of Machias Seal Island besides Tall Barney Beale. My name is Holly Davis, and I was John Norton's partner. That would have been Barna's son. They did defend the ownership of that island because the Canadians kept trying to steal it. That's what they'd say to you. But it's their island.
Being the firstborn son of Tall Barney, he was given Machias Seal Island. And he was very staunch in his claim to Machias Seal Island. Barney fought till the day he died to maintain Machias Seal Island and all that fishing ground in American possession.
And this is the if. This was the first boat that Barney ever took out to Machias Seal Island, and he took, see, he's got passengers right on there right that day. Yeah. He was an entrepreneur, if there ever was one, because the puffins were there. Right. That's a puffin colony. Right. He charged $50 a person, and people started going, and it became very, 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 very popular.
Machias Seal Island?
Machias Seal Island, that was his business. You see this seaweed? This is what we used to have to land on. They went out there because they had to plant the flag on the 4th of July on American soil. Right. That proved right there that who owns the area in the United States.
That way, if the United States claimed it, that bottom of the fishing ground would be open to the fishermen from Jonesport as well as the fishermen from the Cutler area. How many individuals would do what Barney Norton did by defending over 40 years, going to Augusta,
going to Washington,
D.C.,
oh yeah,
to maintain not only did he own the island, but that the island was
America,
United States soil.
And it is United States soil to this day.
Machias Seal Island, and it was given to me by my great-grandfather, and my great-grandfather was Tall Barney Beale. It was August 5, 1971. And I met all the lobster fishermen that fish around there coming with the traps. He says, you see that SOB out there? I looked out there and it looked like a destroyer, but they told us that we were fishing in Canadian waters and that he'd give us 24 hours to get them out. And tomorrow they'd have to be up or they'd be all cut off. So I did the State Department and he said, well, we got to write you a letter.
Just hold it up to the camera.
Hold it so we can read it. We'd like
to
get a copy of that on that video. Canada owns Lighthouse, but don't own the island.
Is that your T-8 drone?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, I tried to call you on that Sunday, Brian, to try to get closer to it than I planned. We were setting it up into the sun, and I thought I was running my own, and when we got to it, it was yours, so I was closer than I planned to be. I'm going to drop that to the eastern the first time I haul it.
I don't know if I got it or not with my anchor, so I'll just let you make you aware of it. He had my inline sunk. It's about strange. So I cut one of his traps off. Nothing malicious, but I had to get my gear up, so I cut his trap off. That's my first tangle of the day with a Canadian. First Canadian call. It wasn't here last time I hauled, they just moved it over here. It's just part of what goes on out here every day. I've only had one Canadian foul so far.
Well, I hope that will be it.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, I'll talk to you a little later. Okay.
Oh, it's frustrating. The fact that he ran over my end line sunk it. There's no need of it.
Now nylon line. Now one of the white nylon line. Like Brian said, sometimes your gear drifts away, even though it's got anchors on it. Brian Cates had too much strain and couldn't handle it, so we had to cut from underneath it. I'm missing 8 traps, so it's going to cost $200 a piece to buy all the new ones. It's just another day in the gray zone. I'd be shot for saying it probably, but both countries have a mandate to make marine parks. Make it a marine park and nobody can fish it. It wouldn't be popular, but it would address the mandate of both countries. And you'd make it so that you didn't have to worry about whether there's any oil and gas under this to fight about, because nobody'd be doing anything in it. It's a way to resolve it without any bloodshed, if you want a resolution to it. If not, we just keep fishing there.
When I was a kid, I liked watching National Geographic specials and Jacques Cousteau and Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, and I was really into sea life. And that's how I got interested in lobsters. My original field site, the property owner across the street was filling in the wetland that was draining into my site. So I had to fit, and he had a permit. And I had to go to the Board of Appeals of the Department of Environmental Protection because that wetland was draining into the lobster nursery. But I was like just a person. I didn't belong to any institution at that time. I was waiting tables. So on that Board of Environmental Protection, there was a lobsterman on the board. I meant nothing to him because I didn't have an institution. And so I made one. I'm Diane Cowan. I founded the Lobster Conservancy to help better understand lobsters. Today here we are in Friendship, Maine, on Friendship, Long Island, where I live with the lobsters and study them on a daily basis. I moved out here May 8th, 1999, and have lived here ever since. It might look like just a pile of rocks with seaweed hanging off it, but there's dramas going on in the lives of all these creatures under the rocks, and there's a lot here. There's so much going on. I have colleagues I work with and have much in common with, but I spend 365 days a year with the lobster. And so I learn things that nobody else knows, just because I'm out there. There's Litorina, Nucella, Dumantia, Chondrus, Fucus with spirorbids, limpets, Crepidula, Begiatoa, anoxic sediments, rock crab, lobby, huge. So that one's probably 6 years old. Lobby is a very scientific name for these small lobsters. Just kidding. It's just a term of endearment. The fishery can't work without the fish. So understanding that animal, how it lives, what it needs to reproduce, keep going, is really important. Oh, shh. It's low tide right now. I have to take some pictures. The habitat changes over time, so how many lobsters here will change too if these rocks disappear. This one is very soft, just shed this morning. Right crusher, long antennae, male, intact. 36.1 carapace length. Measuring them now, I can know about how old they are. It takes about a decade, give or take, to reach sexual maturity and be able to reproduce. These guys are nowhere near that. Lobby! They live in the water column for several weeks, and then they settle to the bottom as little baby lobsters. And that settling means they're making the transition from the surface waters to the bottom. They find these rocks to hide under and live there the rest of their lives. And that should give you an indication of what's coming down the line in the fishery. Lobsters can live for many, many decades, and those big animals do something that the little animals don't do. The big ones move. They've been through a lot before. They've been through storms, they've been through warm years and cold years. We've had them a long time. You make sure those survivors are in the population. And we have some here still, but I think not enough.
Half stand with gravel and shove hash and sand.
Certainly, warming is having an impact. Lobsters can't regulate their own body temperature. They're a cold water animal. If the water doesn't get sufficiently cold in the winter months, they don't produce enough eggs and sperm. And no eggs, no sperm, that's it. For decades, the Maine lobster landings were about 20 million pounds. Then they went up to 40, 60, 70. People asked, are you worried? Are you worried? And I was like, no, the little lobsters are going up too. Those babies on the beach, they're going. And so I think this is okay. But now they're up over 100 million pounds. I don't think this is okay. Just like this wave of increase in landings started in southern New England, we're seeing now in the Southwest declines. I mean, real crashes. Long Island Sound, it's over. Southern New England, there's still lobsters, but not in the numbers you need to make a living. And so, in all probability, looking at the past, if it's repeating, that same wave, the downward wave, is following the same path. So if we get to a point where the lobsters can't find the deep cold water or whatever cold water they need, if they can't get to the cold water, they're really and truly doomed.
Started fishing when I was about 10 years old, and this is a way of life for most of us. And I think these surveys serve a general purpose of keeping this industry alive.
On the landings reports that the guys turn in at the end of the year, that tells us all the legal lobsters that have been landed. But we don't get any data on the juveniles that get thrown back. So that's why we're out here, to try to see how many juveniles do show up in lobster traps. It's one segment of the stock assessment for the entire North Atlantic American lobster fishery.
4 or 5 female, 2 claws.
So we measure each lobster, we record information about whether it's an old shell or new shell, whether it's missing any claws, whether it's got any shell disease, if it has any eggs. It's important to these guys, the lobstermen, because it will affect the rules that are placed on them.
Last of this site.
Up in the gray zone, up in down East Maine area, one reason we believe that the population is decreasing up there so much is because the bottom temperature is more stable than down here. When they first settle, they want that optimum temperature to grow and eat as long as they can to get big and strong before they go out in the world. Up in the gray zone, it's staying at that optimum temperature longer during that period when they first settle. Is that trend going to continue? There's a lot of questions there. Yeah, I guess I am concerned. I think everybody's concerned. The settlement survey is the most concerning because we've seen 3 years of down settlers. So does that mean they're settling somewhere else, somewhere deeper and colder? We're not seeing them? Hopefully that's what it means. Or does it mean that we've also got issues with the plankton population? Are they not getting enough to eat? Or is it a die-off? Is it a lack of juveniles? There's more we don't know than we do know.
We hauled 22 trawls, 330 traps. 10 to 15 crates. The boys will probably make a little bit of money, but I'm not going to make a whole lot. The times I figure out my expenses and everything else, but we only had I don't know, 800 pounds, I guess, altogether. Well, a good day would have been maybe 1,500 or 1,600. But I have had some issues with some gear being hauled, as have some other fellows too. So some of them over there, there's at least one fellow over there that's hauling some of our traps. Sometimes get your gear out, but there, that's done. So end up paying them, and we'll take the boat tomorrow and hopefully take some rest of the week off, perhaps. Enjoy the Labor Day weekend with my family.
What I'd say that was in the crate, about 115 or 20 pounds. A little over half pound to a trap isn't much. Anyway, you got to see the Canadian side of it. We didn't divulge any secrets.
We've already forwarded them to the CIA.
You go right ahead.
Yeah. The Navy has got your number.
Yep. I think they had it long before you come along.
These lobsters here we're loading today, these are gray zone catch. Here they're going to the processor, more than likely the cannery. See if there's any hard shell quality that they can ship overseas. Besides that, you'll buy it in the grocery store in a can or a bag, frozen meat.
Hey guys, gonna be doing some shipping tomorrow? Yep.
Yes, we will be. This is where we store them long term. That right there has about 180 pound of lobsters in it. We call them condos. That's what makes this work, is temperature. We're making them hibernate like a bear. In a controlled environment, we can keep a lot more of this so that it actually makes it to the table instead of waste. The purpose of this facility is to be able to have a quality product that can go anywhere in the world. Not just make it down the road for you to have supper. If somebody wants these in China, they're healthy enough, they'll take an airplane ride to China. This is what we call a purge tank. When you bring these lobsters in, they've been fed hard to be caught. We need to let them poop out. So that's what we do. We put them in here 24 to 48 hours, then we can take them and put them in for long time storage. Do you know the difference between a male and a female? You can see how much fuller her tail is compared to his. See the shape of her shell, fuller for protecting the babies. When she curls up, she'll be full of eggs in here. She curls up, they're gone. If you look at a male when he curls up, you can still see in through. There's actually a little hook on a metal gear, and then that lays back, and they would measure to the back of that shell. He'd be just over the American measure. In the fall, they're catching in bulk. There's all kinds coming ashore. We're separating the quality out and hoping down the road that the price is going to go up so that you can make money. Let's take a little walk. It's a little bit loud in here, but this is the engine room. This is where all the air pumps, water pumps, heat exchanger, chiller barrels, everything we need to make it happen. This is the incoming water temperature from the ocean. This is what Mother Nature starts it at, right here. For this time of year, that's not a normal water temperature. It's increased over the years. This here normally should be reading about 48, 49 degrees. They say a degree temperature change can be devastating for them. These here are gray zone lobsters. It's summer, the water temperature's up. They're going through their molting, the shell's soft, can't store them long term. That wouldn't make an air flight overseas, where a lot of the market is nowadays. 4 or 5 years ago, the gray zone lobster was a better quality than what they catch today. Global warming's real. I mean, the ocean temperatures, we study it daily here. I mean, they don't catch lobsters down below New York no more, and they used to catch lobsters like we do here. It's over. It changed. The water temperature is going to keep increasing, and these animals are not designed to live that way. They're meant for colder water.
These lobsters, they came from, most of them came from right here in Cutler Harbor, Bay of Fundy. I think they'll stay there once they get the cover on, I hope. My wife and I have it maybe this time of year. We'll have it every couple of weeks. We'll have a feed. We got enough here for me. What you guys gonna eat? But for me to bring lobsters home and eat them, on my catch, it costs me as much money as it would somebody else to have. I mean, if I don't sell them, bring them home and eat them, then I'm not getting the income from it. So when available, we'll have some.
The biggest issue for me has been worrying about his safety. But God has taught me over the years to not worry about things that haven't happened. One thing I've always been, proud of and told him is that he's made a good living for us and we've never gone without. But, I pray for him every day, and I have 2 sons that are doing it, and I have to pray for their safety, and, nothing's a guarantee.
Yep.
I said 43 years later, here we are. And I still love him. Right?
Right. Yep. I'm gonna run him over. Thank you, Lord, for the food you provided for us. We just pray your blessing on it, that it might strengthen us and we can further serve you. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay.
So our first lobster that my best friend and I ever caught, we actually caught it from the shore, and we sold it for cash and went and bought candy with it. So I don't have the first dollar ever made, but I remember where I spent it. My name is Jeremy Cates, and Brian Cates is my dad. I have known nothing but fishing my whole life. And it was just watching, my best friends' dads growing up together. They all are fishermen, but things have changed incredibly over the last 20 years. You almost can't recognize the fishery the way it used to be. There was unfished bottom that had not yet been developed. There were less constraints in terms of the conservation rules that we have today. For instance, the mid-90s, the sky was limited. If you wanted to fish 2,000 traps, you could fish 2,000 traps. We are catching more lobsters than we ever used to, but we're also in a position now where we need to catch that many lobsters based on our boat sizes, boat payments, capital investments, and that sort of thing.
She and I, we discussed the ramifications of getting a new boat. The best thing to do is to pray about it and ask the Lord to show us what He'd have us to do. And so, because you can't turn to the Bible and find a verse that says, yeah, thou shalt have a new boat. Yeah, it was a step of faith, and so we went ahead and ordered the new hull, and lo and behold, it's nearly done. It's being finished as we speak out here in town.
Every boat's unique. Everybody's got different ideas, and you want a boat exactly how you want it. So that's the reason of building a new boat. I got into building boats when I went to high school. They had a program, and after high school, I just knew I, wanted to lobster fish and go dragging and do the down east stuff. So I really paid attention to school, and it's come in really handy. Is Brian getting antsy?
Yes.
He's ready for it. He sold his week and a half or so ago, a couple weeks ago. So yeah, he'd love to have his new boat soon. What you're looking at is his new boat, 45 Dixon. Some people want to have a boat that has a dry area. So you can slide the door and go up inside, steaming offshore in the morning. You can stay out of the weather, you know, especially in the fall when it gets cold. And in this case, the dry area will be everything forward, and then your wet area will be everything back. So you have a little flexibility there, I guess. That's one of the really unique boats, part of this boat anyways. We're doing some painting and now hooking up his electronics, wiring, hydraulics, final touches. The pretty stuff, you know, the stainless on the sides, and Brian will come out and he'll put the electronics right where he wants them. And then we'll run the wires to them. The hollow will go into place, the controls will go on the top, steering wheel will go in. I think that's about it. Getting ready to put it in the water here in a couple weeks.
How do you know it's going to float?
Well, I hope it floats. No, it'll float. It's there's no holes in it, nothing like that. No, we've done this a few times.
Yeah. By the end of the season, we're one of the biggest geological events in New England's geological history. Well, this is pretty much run-of-the-mill crushed rock from the quarry, but it's all about the sizes and the spaces between them that make for great shelters for little lobsters. My name is Richard Wally. I'm a research professor in the School of Marine Sciences at the University of Maine. Now, what we're trying to do with our lobster research is to try to develop forecasting tools for trends in the fishery and also try to come to a better understanding of how climate change is influencing the distribution and abundance of lobsters throughout its geographic range. One of the ways we're trying to do that is to monitor the pulse of baby lobsters that settle to the seabed every year.
I see these projects as almost a canary in the coal mine, where it gives us a sense 6, 7, 8 years out whether or not we're going to see a sudden decline in landings.
Unfortunately, with our standard diver-based sampling, we're really limited as to how deep we can go. We're trying to extend our reach into deeper water, and now we're using these biocollectors that are deployed from fishing boats. So basically they're wire mesh boxes lined with finer mesh that keeps the baby lobsters and crabs and other animals in, covered with a 1.5-inch vinyl coated wire mesh top, and they have bridles, and then we rig them up more or less like a lobster trap, and we get not only lobsters that are, you know, as long as your thumbnail, to a whole variety of different marine animals. And we put them on the bottom over a range of depths, crossing a dramatic thermal gradient as we do that to see how deep we see lobster settlement occurring. One of the things that we've been seeing is these dramatic declines in southern New England. At the same time, we've seen this tremendous surge in the Gulf of Maine, and especially in eastern Gulf of Maine toward the Bay of Fundy, as a result of a change in climate. And it's forced the population and nursery habitats to recede from shore into the deeper environments. The Maine lobster harvest comprises about 80% of the U.S. lobster harvest, and currently the lobster harvest in the U.S. is the most valuable fishery in the nation right now, and that's true for Canada as well. These guys don't have any other option. They don't have another fishery to move to as they did back in, say, the 1960s and 70s when groundfish were more abundant. We're perilously dependent on this single fishery.
My name's Frank Kornacki. I started lobstering in 1987.
We fish in the eastern end of Long Island Sound. When I first saw the lobster, and it was like a mini gold rush. It was crazy. There were tons of guys doing it, tons of guys making money, tons of guys buying new boats. And at one time I thought, like, how could this go on? How can this fishery sustain that type of pressure? And it didn't. In the end, it didn't. There's people that, did all right, and there's some that didn't. Presently, I'm a carpenter at Connecticut College, so since I wasn't able to commercial fishing, I don't catch them anymore. I sculpt them, and they don't go away, hopefully. With the warming of the waters, it's progressively getting worse. You never think it's going to end, but history repeats itself, and there's a good chance that the lobster fishery, as it goes from Connecticut to the north, that'll also come crashing down eventually.
The name of the boat is Legacy, which is special to me because I come from a long line of fishermen, and I hope to pass down the legacy that's been passed on to me to my grandchildren. Who knows what the fishery will even be like at that point, but been fishing for several generations now, and hope it continues. Prospects of having hopefully another 8 or 10 more years at least of pretty hard fishing before I think about retiring, so I'm excited to have it and to get using it. I'm really looking forward to working the boat.
Thank you for this beautiful day and the opportunity to launch this boat. We just pray you bless it. Thank you for the safe travels so far. We just pray you bless this boat, the launching of it, and the use of it, and pray it all in your name. Amen.
Amen.
By way of christening, I just want to say a special thanks to Patrick and all of his crew, and it's wonders and my wish and prayer that all the people who worked on this and all who will work on it and all who travel in this boat will have God's blessing, safety, and prosperity. Thank you.
In lands where men are free, no sight is finer to the eye than of an independent trapper from the sea. A boat does not merely transport a man to his traps in the sea. It carries him in some degree to where all men want to go, or at the destination that gives the illusion of security and strength. The boat is a living prop to the spirit of the man. The throaty rumble of the exhaust is the music that he knows, the theme that he understands. Storms smash the coast and take their toll of boat and gear. But whether the fishing is good or bad, the sea belongs to all equally.